What is up, guys? Happy Wednesday. Welcome to the D&D Sports Show. And we have a lot to cover this week, so we're going to get right on into it. Let's start with some college football. What games did you watch this weekend?
Yeah. So this weekend was kind of a interesting weekend in terms of games. There was a lot of top 25. I guess you could say upsets, but in an early season, they're really not always upsets. A lot of teams that I think were overrated kind of lost. I did get to catch the South Carolina Auburn game. Auburn is about two fluky plays away from being 0-4 right now. In my opinion, that's one of the overrated teams this year. The week that I don't talk about this North Carolina team, they finally get their first loss to Florida State in kind of an upset, and Notre Dame squeaks by again. I'm telling you, Notre Dame is always a sketchy team, and now they're in the ACC, so it's setting up a really intriguing matchup against Clemson. They can't make it in the independent card this year.
Yeah, we're going to. I'm interested to see how this whole season plays out. Because it looks like they play Clemson in 3 weeks. So if they manage to go 6-0 going into Clemson, I think that'll be a very intriguing matchup. But however, I want to touch on the biggest upset of the weekend. That Kentucky team taking it to that Tennessee Volunteers team that is ranked 18th. What do you think about that game?
Yeah, and I mean it's no walk in the park what they did week 1 and week 2. But if you could look at, they beat the South Carolina team, who's obviously maybe not be the best team, but I mean they've held their own. I mean they put up 24 against Florida. I mean this South Carolina team is no joke. They're definitely a tough team. Beating them only by 4, and then um you have them beating Mizzou, who obviously Mizzou's been fluky this season. And then, so they really have yet to have that game that really set them over the top, that, proved them to be ranked. And all these SEC teams are ranked because of the other divisions not playing. Um, it's weird to say that, but I mean it's true, because some of these teams, I mean, like I said, they haven't really beat a team that's worth them being ranked, sitting there at even at 2-1. So it'll be interesting. I mean, they had a tough game against Bama this week. Uh, it's not going to be a pretty one. We'll review that more on Friday, but I definitely will be the first one to announce that I was wrong about Tennessee being back in any sort of way, because if the Tennessee team that showed up these past 2 weeks shows up against Bama, it might be like the Clemson game, 73-7.
Yeah, and touching on what you said about a lot of these teams being ranked who usually aren't ranked, I mean, it's just for the lack of teams that are playing currently. And we'll see next weekend when the Big Ten actually starts their play. We see them kind of move into the ranks, and we'll see teams kind of phase out that probably usually aren't there. So I think next weekend is the big tell. Next weekend is the big weekend that we decide who actually deserves their ranking and earns their schedule so far. But I do want to touch on this SMU team. I know they haven't played. They've been playing very well. Their opponents have been, I don't want to say lackluster, but they're kind of mediocre, middle of the pack. So how far do you think this SMU team goes before they get a loss?
Well, that's one of the things that I was kind of gonna bring up on Friday, but we can go ahead and just touch on it a little bit. Now is there's a very it's a very intriguing thing with this season, with the lack of teams playing, and the fact that there's certain teams that are playing a full schedule, and you have the teams like the Pac-12 who are going to be playing 7 games, and you just don't know how that's going to factor into the college football committee. But I think that this weekend is kind of the telling game of how the rest of the season for SMU is going to go, because I think if they can go They're at home this weekend against number 9 Cincinnati team. And I think if they can come out or if they can go home with a win, and it's convincing at all, I think that there's no reason why they shouldn't roll through the rest of the season. Looking at the schedule, Navy at home, Temple away. That Tulsa game is kind of intriguing because Tulsa's been playing their opponents pretty tough. Houston and East Carolina. I mean, there's no reason why they couldn't run the table. And hopefully, if they win this game convincingly enough, it'll give them enough to kind of vault them forward. I mean, the only thing is like right now their only win that's going to really be on their resume is beating Memphis by 3. So it'll be intriguing to see how Memphis finishes that season. But I mean, I like SMU. They're my second favorite team. It's the joke is it's the place where Texas quarterbacks go when they don't don't become the starter. So it always has a special place in my heart. Garrett Gilbert went there. Now Shane's there. So it's always interesting to see how the SMU does.
Now, last thing on this game, does SMU break the top 10 in rankings?
I don't know. I mean, with the fact that the Big Ten hasn't played games and are still in the top 25 is beyond me. They should just not be in there at all. Like, I understand that Ohio State is going to finish in the top 25, but they shouldn't be in there right now until they have played their first game this weekend. It doesn't really make sense in my opinion. So, I mean, I don't see them cracking the top 10 this week unless there's a big major shakeup. Which, I mean, there doesn't seem to be that many. I don't think there's any. The only one that could be is Oklahoma State. They haven't played anyone, so they could potentially fall. And then, I mean, there could be a few of these Big Ten teams who are a little rusty coming out of the gate. But other than that, I don't see them cracking the top 10. Maybe like top 12. They could be ranked there at 12, but I don't think there's going to be that many teams that lose in the top 10 where they'll be ranked in the top 10.
Okay. And the biggest game of the weekend had to be this Alabama Georgia game. So once again, Mac Jones throwing it in our face, literally, that he is able to pass the ball. 417 yards for 4 touchdowns. How did his performance propel this Alabama team to this win over a stout Georgia defense?
Yeah, and I mean, it's not. I wouldn't say it's necessarily like necessarily what I want to say is it's kind of weighted down. Like his passing stats were a little bit with that 90-yard touchdown definitely helped the busted coverage on that. And then he also had I think he also had a 35 40-yard touchdown as well. But I think that it was definitely it was a lot closer of a game than what people thought with Georgia being going in with the lead into halftime. But I knew that like if you watch the first half at all, you could see towards the end Alabama was kind of starting to figure out what they needed to do to stop them. They kind of gave them the short field to work with. 2 times there in the second quarter, gave up 10 points from it. So obviously it's not really. I don't think that this is really a testament to Georgia choking. I think it's a testament to Alabama showing that they're resilient, showing that they can make halftime adjustments that they've been making for the last 10 years. And I think that this is just another Nick Saban victory, in my opinion.
Najee Harris once again, putting the screws to a good run defense, still being able to find those holes, cut to the outside for 152 yards.
Yeah, his draft stock is definitely going up. So that'll be something to watch going forward. If this team keeps winning and he keeps getting 100+ yards a game, I mean, he's going to be up there with Travis Etienne as those front runners for the Heisman.
I 100% agree with that statement. So don't forget, once again, we had 3 postponed games due to COVID. I'm anxious to see how these teams will fare next week after having a week off. Um, I was really looking forward to this LSU Florida game too. That's just an unfortunate side turn of what's going on currently. But What do you say we move on to NFL?
Yeah, I wanted to touch one more thing I mean, it's actually the perfect thing to transition to. So, in a recent interview, I don't know if you've seen about this, but in a recent interview, I was reading this on Facebook, but Roddy White got interviewed and was asked about Trevor Lawrence and how he was playing and what would happen. And he got brought up if it comes down to it and the Jets don't win a single game and you're looking there and you're sitting there and you're being Trevor Lawrence and you're looking there and you're like, do I come out of the draft this year or do I come back for my senior year and play one more year at Clemson? Are you taking the money or are you going back? And because I mean the Jets have always been historically the place where quarterbacks go to die.
And I did see that interview, and I will agree he should probably come back and at least contend for another national championship if that's the case. And because that being said, look at how Sam Darnold was treated. He had the starting job, got the starting job, and then got benched after really his play wasn't great, yes, but it wasn't his fault that they were losing games because their defense couldn't stop anything. So if I was Trevor Lawrence and the Jets had the first pick, I'd be going back to Clemson to win another national championship. That's just
Yeah,
my opinion.
and I mean, it's crazy to think this, but I mean, thinking back in like in recent memory, all the good quarterbacks, used to be a staple for a quarterback to go 4 years. But if you think about it, I mean, Trevor Lawrence has this chance to do something that hasn't been done in a long time, and if he does happen to go back and he manages to stay healthy, he could be one of the greatest quarterbacks in college football history. Like not even joking. Like he could definitely at least be in like the top like 50 like quarterbacks of all time. Because I mean, with the recent if you have one good season, you're out. A lot of times people aren't 4 year starters like Trevor was. It's just, I mean, it's kind of crazy how it worked out. But I mean, he has a chance to do something that not a lot of people can do. And I mean, if you weigh your options, and obviously there's a chance that a really bad team could have the pick next year. But I mean, it's something that I would almost risk just to see because maybe a team has a really bad season. Maybe say a team that like a recent past, like that Colts team where the quarterback got hurt. They just had really terrible quarterbacks. And, Peyton Manning in this case, he was hurt. So they were terrible with Curtis Painter. And
No, the paint man.
yeah. And Andrew Luck got drafted to that team. And so he instantly competed. I mean, maybe he'll be lucky, have something like that happen, but
Or
we'll
he'll
just
be
have to see.
super unlucky and the Jets end up getting the first pick next year and we have to have this conversation again.
Well, I mean, he can't then. Like
Right, he can't
yeah.
go back, but then we have to have the conversation of, well, was his decision the correct decision at this point in time?
Yeah,
So,
because I don't remember who it was one of the ESPN guys that said, is he going to pull a Eli Manning and say he will not play in New York? Don't
but
draft me.
then,
I'm not going to play. Like,
yeah,
yeah,
this is
yeah.
just gonna be.
Something that we
We'll have
talk
to
about.
see.
We'll have to talk
Yeah,
about this again when it gets closer to that time about declaring and everything.
because right
So
now he's looking really. He looks very good where he's at.
yeah, and I mean, he looks like he's going to be primed. I think he's one of those. I mean, at worst, he's going to be a mid-tier quarterback at worst, going into the league. Um, I mean, it's going to take him a little bit, but we saw what happened with so far with Joe Burrow in his career early. He's, him being relied on to be the guy is definitely not something that you want to be for your young career. Um, and that just brings up what we talked about a few episodes ago, where we talked about if you can groom your quarterback for a little bit, you're gonna be in good shape. You got the Josh Allen, you got Patrick Mahomes who sat behind Alex Smith. You have all of these guys who got to sit behind a really good quarterback, or at least a decent quarterback. And now the most recent one being, I'm curious to see how this Tua situation goes, which will transition to our next segment of the NFL. Um, so why don't we just start there? I know it's kind of out of order, but this is just something that I really wanted to get to talk to because I'm intrigued to hear your thoughts. But right off the bat, Tua named the starter after going in and completing both of his passes, his first 2 NFL passes. What's your thoughts on this? Because it's not really, I don't know, it's a head scratcher to most people, but I mean, it's just something that we knew it was ultimately going to come, but I don't think we thought it was going to come in week 6.
Right, and you and I talked about this before we went on the air. When Fitzpatrick originally came out in the press conference for the beginning of the season, he said, "Hey, look, I'm a placeholder. When Tua feels he is ready to come onto the field, I will embrace that and I will go ahead and step back." It's this is very interesting at the time because the Dolphins are 3-3. They have been playing good football, and Fitzpatrick's numbers aren't bad. Yes, I guess the teams that he's played against, but he's competing. But what I saw from Tua when he was in for that drive, he looked super comfortable. And after coming back from that almost career-ending surgery, it's kind of like, is Miami jumping the gun a little bit too quickly? I mean, I guess only time will tell. But I do believe that Tua can come in and make a difference for this team. And I do think having Fitzpatrick there helping him along the way will do wonders for him down the road.
Yeah, and so this is kind of what I'm thinking of. So they're coming off the 24-0 victory. I mean, obviously Fitzpatrick, kind of upset about the benching. With them sitting there in one game out of first place. But I think with the schedule coming up, a Rams team that's been struggling, the Cardinals who are hit and miss every week in and week out, a Chargers team with a rookie quarterback in their own, then the Broncos and Jets and Bengals. I think if it wasn't this week, it'd be next week because I think with this upcoming schedule, you have basically 5-6 games where you can test him out, and if he's looking like he's struggling or not ready for the spotlight, then you can put Fitzpatrick back in and prepare for those last 4 weeks where they have Chiefs, Patriots, Raiders, and the Bills. Because I think he'll have a short leash because they are still within striking distance of the playoffs. So I think, give him 2 weeks maybe to just see, even maybe 1 week. If he goes in the first half and just is a stinker and they're still in the game because of that defense, I think there's no reason why if this
Fitzpatrick
isn't
doesn't get called back.
no, I think he should definitely be ready to play for sure. And I bet they'll probably still split reps at practice this week because I think that he's got to be ready. And that's just what he's been doing his whole career is just being ready. So
Yeah, this is going to be a very interesting rest of the season for this team. I do think that maybe they should have played the season close to the vest with Fitzpatrick and kind of let him play this whole season, and then kind of groom Tua and kind of. Yes, I agree that maybe in garbage time let him play, but kind of not throw him into the fire just yet because I don't know if he's 100% ready. I mean, just think 2 years ago, we never thought he was going to play again. So I think this is a really defining moment for this career. And if it's a really bad call by the Dolphins, I think this will damage Tua's career for the rest, like extremely bad.
yeah, it's one of those things where it's like we're just gonna have to wait and see how it works out. So let's just start over. We'll start we'll just keep moving on to the next game. The Stinker Bowl. This past weekend we had Giants getting their first win over Washington, which now leaves the Jets in sole possession of the Ophir Award. Washington, I mean, in a division this close, what are your thoughts on that Ron Rivera decision to go for 2 at the end of regulation?
I mean, desperation, if that's really what we want to call it. This Neither one of these teams looked really good. I think um, this Giants defense just looked better than the Washington offense. However, this decision to go for 2 really, you know, it changed the momentum of the game at that point. It was kind of like, oh, we're so desperate, let's go for 2, try to get the win instead of going for the tie. And it was just
I mean, they were beating them in yards. I mean, their offense obviously was like putting up major points, but I mean, they were beating them in terms of that. But I'm just it just doesn't really make sense to me in a division where if they would have won that game or even taken it to overtime and got a tie, they would be tied for second place. It just doesn't make sense to me at all. But I'm sure, Ron Rivera is just trying to make some plays happen, especially with his really young team. So, I mean, it's one of those things where it's like you got to look at the bigger picture. Obviously, if he gets it, we're not really talking about it. We're talking about the gutsy call that it was, and
Right. But I also want to say, where did Devontae Freeman go?
I was I was always giving him credit, and I think he was one of those sleeper picks that I've always been picking week in and week out. But yeah, he's
This should
I
have been a defense he tore up. I mean, and
yeah, I mean, he only managed 61 yards, and it's one of those underwhelming performances. I mean, it's tough to run behind that offensive line. I mean, even if you add up all the rushing guys, I mean, they only have 527 yards on the season. So it's one of those things where it's like that doesn't all fall on Devonta Freeman, but he definitely needs to figure it out before this season gets to be too late down the line. I mean, he's playing for another contract.
right, and he's got a short week this week.
Yeah,
We'll
with
touch.
them coming. Yeah, we'll talk about that after we finish up this weekend. But we do have another matchup, or well, not a matchup, but we do have another team from the NFC least. That played this week. That honestly kind of surprised some people. I know that they put up some points in towards the end when the Ravens stepped off the gas. So what do you think about this Eagles performance? Showing that it wasn't. They're trying to gut out a performance.
I mean, early on, Carson Wentz did not look good. Um, through the first three quarters, he was kind of lackluster. This Ravens defense kind of had their way with him. But I don't know what it is this year about fourth quarters, but apparently quarterbacks turn it on. I mean, we've seen it multiple games where quarterbacks just go, "Holy crap! I actually have to play now," and they start playing to their normal level. And we saw that this week with Carson Wentz. Um, Now that whole gutsy, we're talking about gutsy calls this week. That 2 point conversion play that they had was a terrible. I know they had to go for it, but why did they call that play? A QB keeper right there. That was not the right call. I think you should have at least tried another pass up the middle because that Ravens defense had that little gap right there. But overall, this is an upside. Now the downside to this is no Miles Sanders for Thursday and no Zach Ertz as well.
Yeah, and I think I mean obviously this loss doesn't completely fall back onto it, but if you think about it, with the decision in the third quarter to go for two, um, in a weird situation where it was 17. I mean, at the time it was 17-0. So even if you get that 8, you're still. I mean, you're down 9. So it's just a weird situation to go for two. If you kick it there, then you only have to kick it at the end of the game. It's just one of those decisions where it's like it doesn't make sense. Um, but at the end of the day, that's why we're sitting here. We're not in the NFL, so
Right,
uh
we're just analyzing things.
yeah, exactly. And like it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense in my opinion though with the score the way it was. Um But another decent day. Lamar Jackson is definitely not putting up MVP numbers this year. The offense in Baltimore is slowing down. I mean, even though they put up 30 points, a lot
That
of
was more
that.
of a defense contention as
I
well.
mean, yeah, if you look at it, they had the ball. They had to drive the ball 47 yards, 28 yards, 35 yards, 38 yards, 2 yards. I mean, the one drive of 50 plus was to end the first quarter, and that was all Lamar Jackson on the 37-yard run. And basically, he took it like that was half the drive for him. So it wasn't. I mean, they didn't have to drive the ball. This team. This team is. I mean, they're definitely good, but I like the Steelers a little bit more. I know that the people are going to say the Steelers haven't really played much, but I mean, they just whooped the Browns, and people were saying the Browns were back, which that kind of leads us into that game. Well, Baker is Baker the guy in Cleveland?
I don't believe so. When I say this, I like Baker in Oklahoma. He is not transitioning well to the NFL. He is way too streaky and too inconsistent to be a starting quarterback in the NFL. I say this as Ben Roethlisberger throws, 14 for 22 and 162 yards, but he didn't have to do much due to that defense destroying this Browns offensive line and just this offense. Um, and I think if anybody was smart, this whole offense would leave Cleveland. That includes Jarvis Landry, Odell Beckham, Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt. All of them should probably get out of Cleveland soon because this team is not making the playoffs.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like they should take advantage of starting to build up. I think, man, it's I can't even begin to talk about it. But I'm a Texas fan, so even at Oklahoma, he couldn't win the big game. Oklahoma's never really been able to win the big game. But I mean, I just like to look at this for just a second because I think that this is kind of one of those things that needs to be said. But if you look at the top 10 quarterbacks in Big 12 history, all right, I'm talking to all of you NFL GMs out there who are looking at going into this next season like, oh, you know what? It looks like there's some potentially a quarterback I could take here. Well, let me just elaborate on you. So the top 10 quarterbacks of the BCS era are Vince Young at number one. What did he do? What did he do in the NFL? Obviously injuries kind of plagued his career. He did go out. I think he won Rookie of the Year with Tennessee. But after that, I mean, injuries plagued him. Done. RG3. I mean, he's still with the Ravens. He's a very electric player. Don't get me wrong, but injuries, Dunsky. Sam Bradford, injuries. Got paid a lot of money. Congratulations.
Not in the NFL.
Colt McCoy, career backup. Kind of got given his chance with the Browns, unfortunately. Nothing. Josh Hoople from Oklahoma. I mean, you haven't heard that name in a hot minute. I know that he played in college in 2000, so he'd be like in his 20th season right now, but still nothing. Brad Smith from MIZZOU. Brandon Weeden, the guy who got drafted.
That's a Dallas name.
Yeah, that is the old. Well, let's see. He was drafted the same year Manziel was, right?
Yep.
Eric
Manziel.
Eric Couch.
Bro.
There's a theme here, of people who got drafted by really.
They could all be on the back of a Browns jersey at this point in time.
Well, that wasn't Eric. That was Tim, wasn't it?
I know, but I'm just saying if we're listing off these, it could be like that. One of those Browns jerseys that has a list of all the quarterbacks that they used over the 5 years.
Yeah,
which actually included a decent amount of these quarterbacks we're mentioning currently.
Yeah, I mean he played for I think he was drafted by the Rams. And I think that he never really amounted to anything. Eric Couch anyway. But then you have Jason White, who was a really good quarterback at Oklahoma for a long time. And then Graham Harrell, the man who groomed Patrick Mahomes. I mean, if you look at those top 10 quarterbacks and you just amount their careers to what they've done in the NFL, I think if I'm a GM, and even last year, I was saying this when he got drafted. I mean, if you're sitting there, you're looking at a Big 12 quarterback, they just have historically not had a defense they've had to face. And that counts for 9 of their games, 10 of their games. It's just something that you just got to kind of take a second glance at. And you're like, better not. Even if you continue on the list, you got fucking Chase Daniel, career backup. Let's see if there's any other names that stick out. Landry Jones is out of the league, and he was about to be in the XFL. Cliff Kingsbury, the coach for the the coach for the Cardinals.
I mean, I get what you're saying, and
Yeah, and I just wanted to bring all that up because this is something that I've always thought about, about how they even or why he was even drafted when he was drafted. I mean, I think it even like obviously it was the Browns. It's tough. He was probably the best option at quarterback that year, which is he's starting to look like he wasn't necessarily the best option this year because there's a few other people in that draft who are pulling ahead of him. But it's still I don't think he's the guy. I think they need to take advantage of all the value they'll get for Odell and Jarvis and kind of start building from the ground up.
yeah, and this team, if you look at this Browns team, they are 4-2, yes, but they have beat the Bengals, Washington, Dallas, and the only credible win to their defense is against the Colts. So 4-2 looks a lot like 0-6.
Yeah, I mean, and that Colts team is let's just transition to that game. I mean, I think it comes down to what Phil Rivers does. It will be how far this team can go because this team has the potential to make a playoff run in that division. Um, but in my opinion, it's they live and die by Philip Rivers because if he tries to do what he's done in the last few weeks, if he does it against the Browns, I think that he needs to know when to force it, when not to force it. I think that they live and die by him. And I think it's one of the sneaky signings of the season that not a lot of people gave credit to the Colts, but because their defense is definitely good enough to win now, even though they're still a relatively young unit. So it'll be interesting to see how they do that, over the next few weeks.
I do think they need to get help from their run game. And because Jonathan Taylor's not fully cutting it currently, and with Hines being out, I just I don't know.
Well,
They need a more balanced attack.
I think Jonathan Taylor, obviously he's still in his first year and he's waiting for that breakout game. But I mean, if you look at even with Clyde Edwards-Helaire, he finally had his breakout game this week against the Bills. I think that I think Hines is really obviously him being out hurts, but I think he's more of a passing down back, as he's in the top 5 in his team in receiving yards. But I think that ultimately comes down to is just that defense is going to keep you in games. You just have to be smart with the ball. If they, turnovers is a huge thing. Um, like Philip Rivers is sitting there with a 7 touchdown, 6 interception stat line. That's not going to make you the playoffs. You're going to have to. That needs to be in the next few weeks. That needs to be turned into it needs to be 14, 15, and 7. If they want to have a chance to make the playoffs. You just got to be better with the ball. They need to score. They need to be score more early than they have been. A lot of their games they haven't necessarily scored a whole lot in the first quarter. So it'll be interesting to see them, come out to a fast start this weekend. I mean, if there was a weekend to right to ship, it'd be this weekend, especially with the Ravens coming to town in 2 weeks. So they're gonna have to take care of business against the Lions.
Yeah, we'll just see how this all plays out. I mean, I I don't see them making the playoffs this year, especially behind a Tennessee team that's playing absolutely great right now. I mean, we'll transition into this game, I guess. Well, what'd you think about Derrick Henry this weekend?
I mean, Derrick Henry once again proving everyone wrong. When in terms of fantasy running backs, just Alabama running backs in general. I mean, it's one of those games where it's not surprising because we've seen him do it week in and week out. But I think just the production kind of caught up this week. With the hype, I'd say, because there's a lot of hype, with him stiff arming Josh Norman last week on a play that didn't even count. I'd like to mention for all the viewers out there, didn't even count because there's a holding penalty. but I think that he finally kind of lived up to the hype. And I mean, that game was a lot closer than it probably should have been. Um, Briefly, we can touch on this, but they really need to figure out the offensive coordinator situation in Houston if they want to win games. Um, and they need to make a decision fast because what they're doing right now is ultimately going to cost them in the long run. And it's one of those things where it's like, I mean, you got the lead with a minute 50 to go. Like offensively, you should probably, I don't know, maybe less time on the clock when they scored or something of that nature. There just has to be something different clock management. And that defense also, I mean, they got torched on that last drive. So it's one of those things where they need to figure it out now, because either this is a lost season or they're going to try to win some games. So it's up to them what they want to do at this point.
And I don't see this being a salvageable season for Houston at this point. After going 1-5, but yes, there were a lot of questionable play calls at the end of this game. Um, and I agree with you. Maybe less time on the clock to give Tennessee the ball back. However, they didn't really need much time when Derrick Henry had the ball running down the field. They just couldn't stop him. So, are we essentially saying there should have been no time on the clock to give that ball back to Tennessee to let them drive, or should they have been able to play better coverage into
Well,
this run?
so I think that also some of it comes back to I think obviously Romeo Cromwell had an idea, with that late 2-point conversion. And I think that he wanted to put the game away and he didn't want to give them even the opportunity to drive down and score and get the 2-point conversion. But in that case, you have to trust your defense to at least stop them on a 2-point conversion. You got to give your team a chance. I mean, you got to kick that extra point. In my opinion, I mean, yes, that offense was good, but you've basically shut them out the second half. I mean, they had one touchdown in the fourth quarter. Your defense was kind of holding. You guys made the comeback. I think you just got to trust your defense, kick the extra point, go up by 8, and, give yourself a chance. Because, I mean, ultimately, obviously, looking back on it, it could have been a whole different ball game. I mean, it just blows my mind at these coaches choosing to go for 2 ultimately. I know that the kick's not a gimme anymore. We've seen plenty of missed extra points. You don't want it to fall on that, but I still think that in that decision, it just has to be done.
And I think this week as a whole, we saw a lot more gutsy play calls that did not work out. However, on the flip side, if all these plays would have worked out, we would have probably called some of these coaches geniuses for what they called. So, does that determine how these play calls get determined later on the season, knowing that they're not working out as well as they should?
I don't think it really affects the game plan. I think most people have a pretty set game plan going into games. I just don't think that. I think everybody kind of has their own way to look at things, but obviously, Romeo Cromwell he's an interim coach right now. So he's trying to make a big play. Maybe, I mean, he might be vying for a job, somewhere else if he shows that he can freaking do it. So I think it's just one of those gutsy calls that if it works out, he's praised for it for the week. And it didn't work out for him. And ultimately, I mean, who knows? He could have kicked the extra point. Tennessee could have drove down, went for 2, got it, tied it up, and they still won in overtime, and it wouldn't have mattered, like, if he didn't make the decision. So it's one of those things where it's like, if he works out, great. If it doesn't, great.
I get what you're saying on that one. But nonetheless, Titans are 5-0. This is
Yeah.
a good start for them.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see them play another really good team this week, coming off of this kind of reality check for this defense. And I think it'll be interesting to see if if old Big Ben can take care of business this weekend in that makeup game. Um, but staying with that similar theme, kind of a surprising performance and a letdown would be this Falcons Vikings game. A lot of people said that the Vikings were going to run away with this one. Nobody picked the Falcons. I mean, obviously this Vikings team is bad. This Falcons team is bad, but this Falcons team has just been historically bad this year. I I mean, good for them winning, but bad for them winning because I honestly think that if this team would have went over or wins 1 to 2 games at most, I could definitely see this team being an intriguing candidate to be in the Trevor Lawrence sweepstakes.
Yeah, well, they kind of blew that one so far already. I mean, you got at this point you have the Falcons, the Giants, Washington, the Jets. I mean,
And
you wanted to,
out of all of those teams that I would want to go to, I would not want to go to any of them, in my
not
opinion.
at this point.
I mean, Atlanta would be the most intriguing because they historically at least compete every year. The Giants, they have Daniel Jones. He's not the answer. That's why you don't trade up to take a Duke quarterback. Um, then you have the Washington football team who's still they have Dwayne Haskins, but I think they've given up on Dwayne Haskins. Um, it's just one of those things where it's like I think this Falcons team would have been a really good fit for him, especially because Matt Ryan's not done yet. I mean, obviously, if they went 1-14, 15, whatever, this season, however many games they play with COVID and everything, I think that it would have been a decent fit because Matt Ryan still could have played next year, and they could have kind of built a team for Trevor for the future. But I don't know. We'll see. This Falcons team is obviously going to compete, and they're not going to try to just throw their season away. So it'll be interesting to see. Another team that kind of surprised everybody was this Broncos Patriots game. Patriots coming off of a really long hiatus. We knew they were going to be rusty, but we did not know that they were going to be rusty enough to lose to the Broncos, who, I mean, Philip Lindsay, credit him for basically putting the team on his back. Because not a whole lot else went good. I mean, if you're going to pick an MVP for the weekend, I mean, I don't think you can pick. I mean, who would have thought that the MVP of the weekend would be a kicker?
I agree. I mean, just this game as a whole, the kicking was honestly the staple for both teams. And credit to Brandon McManus for honestly just carrying his team. I never thought I'd actually use that sentence, by the way.
I never thought I would see a kicker being the MVP of the weekend, but I mean, if you look at it, if we were going based on value for a team, if you don't have Brandon McManus there and he's not making all those kicks, this is a completely different ball game. I mean, when you score all of your team's points, Drew Lock, a pretty rough day, got sacked twice, threw 2 interceptions, had a 19 QBR. It just wasn't good. I mean, Philip Lindsay, credit him for 100 yards rushing. In the absence of the DUI man. So it'll be interesting to see this Patriots team rebounds. They got to get it figured out. They got a 49ers team who looked like they kind of figured it out against the Rams team coming up this weekend. So it'll be interesting to see that. What do you think about this Rams team though? This Rams team it's what, man, I thought when they played Buffalo and they played all the way down to the wire, I thought that this team was going to be the team to run. Like they were going to be the one to push the Falcons or not the Falcons, the Seahawks to the brink.
I'm still salty because I lost my survivor pool due to the Rams losing to the 49ers. This game just was sloppy. Jimmy G had a good game after his horrendous game last week. Um, but we didn't see much of this Rams offense that has been ranted and raved about. That has been considered a high-powered, high-octane offense. We didn't see that against this 49ers defense, which to me seems like they're starting to find their treading to get back to where they were a year ago. So if this defense continues to trend upward and get back to where how they played, I think this team could sneakily come back and take this division out of Seattle's contention. I don't think the Rams will contend any further.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you look at the bigger picture. I Jared Goff under 200 yards. Daryl Henderson really didn't get it going. He had under 100 yards rushing, but the guy supposed to step up. You have the Cooper Cup. You have Robert Woods. Combined, they had 40 yards receiving. Your players have to find a way to make big plays. I mean, if you look at San Francisco, George Kittle found the end zone. He's their leading receiver right now. He's the staple in that offense with everybody being hurt and everything. And then you have Debo Samuel who found a way to the end zone. I mean, the big time players find a way to make an impact. I mean, Robert Woods, yes, had a touchdown, but the other one was Josh Reynolds, kind of towards the end of the game. I mean, it was kind of towards garbage time. I mean, they had the lead by enough to where it was safe enough for them to give up a touchdown. But it just doesn't make sense how this Rams team can play the Bills so close. And basically, like, I mean, I don't know. Whenever I saw that, I really thought that they were going to be the top dog in this division. Obviously, the Bills have kind of slipped up as of lately in terms of the last two games, but we'll talk about them here in a minute. But I don't know. I think this 49ers team is starting to get traction. Their defense is, and I think it'll be intriguing to watch them, the next few weeks.
Yeah, and like I just said, the 49ers could be the dark horse in this conference. I mean, Seattle looks good. The Rams did look good. They're starting to kind of trend downward. I'm anxious to see how they try to get back on track next weekend. But moving on in this division is a team we didn't expect to play as well as they are playing. That is this Cardinals team.
Yeah, this Cardinals team is one of those teams that has been really, 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 really like on the hot seat. And by a hot seat, I mean they've just been fluky. And yes, they've won. They're 4-2. But if you look at the resume of the team that they beat, they beat the 49ers week 1, where they were. I mean, yes, that's week 1. That was I mean, that was kind of the full power of San Francisco before, everybody kind of, I mean, they didn't have everybody, but before everybody kind of started to go down. Then they beat the Washington football team. They lost to the Lions. They lost to the Panthers. They beat the Jets and they beat the Cowboys. The next 5 games, in my opinion, will be the summary of this season. And this will be how they finish the season because they have Seahawks at home, Dolphins at home, Bills at home, then they go to Seattle, and then they go to New England. And I think those 5 games are going to be huge when it comes to how the season's going to go for them. If Kenyon Drake is going to keep, I mean, is he going to keep
This was a
producing like he was?
for him.
Exactly, and like he hasn't done anything necessarily of note to this year. So it'll be interesting to see this team. Like I said, I have my eye on them, but I need to see something against a good team because I mean the Panthers is the best team in this like discussion. I mean, except the 49ers are kind of getting back to where they were, but like I said, they weren't the team that they were from last year, and they still haven't lived up to that hype. But yeah, the best team in there was the Panthers, and they lost to them. So with that being said, I mean 38-10 is a little weighted too because Andy Dalton is not the answer in Dallas. So
Yeah, and I 100% agree with that. I'm very sad as a Cowboys fan to watch the rest of the season now that Dak is not going to be playing.
I think that with that I think that the Cowboys, honestly, that's the best thing that could have happened for Dak is if Andy Dalton continues to struggle, even with the same offensive weapons and everything, even after he gets a few weeks under his belt. Because I think that if they start to lose games, I think that's the best thing for Dak because I think that means that just how important Dak is to that team. And I think
Now,
that for like contract talks, I think that helps him.
can I offer you an interesting statistic?
Absolutely.
In the past 2 decades, if the Cowboy quarterbacks that are not named Tony Romo or Dak Prescott have a combined 5 losing seasons and a combined 4-24 record.
Oh, I mean that's the thing though. That's like without Dak and Tony Romo. I mean, hell, that's like the last like 15 years of your guys's
Franchise.
franchise. Yeah, like
One hundred
it's been a
percent.
staple. Is like the quarterback has always been. You knew the quarterback was. It was never like it was. You were in a Brown situation or Jacksonville or somebody who has had like 6 different quarterbacks. Um, but yeah, no, it's going to be tough. I mean, they're still in the division lead right now. So we'll see if Andy Dalton, give him another week or so. We'll
I'll
see
give him a
how.
couple weeks before I
Yeah.
start ragging.
So another kind of stinker game in terms of production on the field. This Lions Jaguars game. It was an intriguing game. Matthew Stafford kind of, I mean, it wasn't even really him who did the damage. It was that run game that got going. Finally, DeAndre Swift got his feet underneath him against this Jacksonville team. But there just wasn't a whole lot going for this Jaguars team. How the mighty have fallen. A lot of people were giving them too much credit after that week 1 win. Almost beating the Titans, and then just kind of, I mean, they've been in every game, but it's just
They've been there, but they haven't been there. If that makes any sense to anybody who's watching. But they've been in the game close enough to compete, but far enough away not to be able to secure another win.
And now this is one of those dark horse candidates to get one of the top 2 guys in the draft, in my opinion, because I think that, I mean, this team is obviously, I mean, they're giving up 30 points a game. It's not like their defense is really outstanding, but I think this is one of those situations where if you can get Gardner Minshew to produce for another, 1 to 2 years, if he can be the guy, if you draft a Justin Fields or Trevor Lawrence and have them sit behind you, this could be a dark horse candidate. If this season continues to trend down, obviously they still have a lot of winnable games. They play the Vikings, they play the Colts again, they play this Chargers team this week, who Justin Herbert is the guy, I do believe, but I think it's going to take him a little bit to get going because he's still going to make those rookie mistakes this year. So I think that they're still going to win. They're probably going to win 3 or 4 games. They'll be out of the Trevor Lawrence sweepstakes if he goes out this year, but he'll be a dark horse to maybe get a Justin Fields or Trey Lance.
Yeah, and this defense was so good about a year or 2 ago, and they just haven't played up to their expectations. I mean, they were almost contenders last year. Um, but they also had Nick Foles that didn't play well, and then Minshew mania came into existence, and that team contended all the way to the end of the season. Now, it's just kind of lost its touch. And this Lions team is not great. Let's be honest here. This win could have been a fluke, for all we know, but we'll find out in the weeks to come.
Well, I'd like to mention one more thing about this game. I thought it was really intriguing, but did you see the story about the Jaguars kicker?
No, I did not.
Yeah, so he is actually a career he played soccer for his entire high school career, all the way through grade school and everything. And he went to Kentucky to play soccer, and then he transferred to Louisville and decided that he wanted to walk onto the football team. And he was a kickoff specialist. Never kicked a field goal all the way up through his collegiate career. And his first career field goal was a make for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And he was also a part of history because for the first time since they merged in 1970, they have had a different player make a extra point in 5 games in a row. So they've had 5 different kickers make 5 field goals or PATs.
I did not know that, actually. That's intriguing.
Yes, John Brown. John Brown is the guy who walked on at Louisville and was only strictly on kickoffs, and he got a field goal opportunity he missed the second one, but hey, he made the first one, so that's that he made history. All right, moving on to the next game. I think we're gonna finish up the early slate of games though, real quick. So let's just jump into Bears Panthers. Biggest surprise of the season, in my opinion. Bears sitting there 5-1. It's kind of amazing what they've been doing, especially with the lack of quarterback play, in my opinion. Even with Nick Foles, I mean, he's doing enough to win games. That's something that Mitch Trubisky couldn't do. So obviously, Nick Foles, credit to you. This Bears defense is though looking like old Bears defense. I think they got everything clicking. That D line is definitely one of the best in the National Football League, and I think it'll be interesting to watch them as they have to take on the more credible opponents and in the next 3-4 weeks with the Titans, Saints, Rams, Packers. It's going to be interesting to see who comes out of this division from a Chicago Green Bay standpoint.
Right, and yes, this Bears defense is probably one of the best in the league. Let's be honest. But this offense still needs to find their identity. You don't really see. I mean, David Montgomery has had games where he has run well, but he isn't a consistently good runner currently. And I think that is going to hurt this credibility going further into the season. And Allen Robinson, they don't have a good number two. So when Allen Robinson gets double and triple teamed like he has been currently, he has not been able to get open. So that leaves this offense to be very vulnerable to a fact that they cannot get a second receiver open to move that ball downfield. I think this defense is carrying this team currently.
I mean, it's one of those things that it's going to have to catch up with the defense. It's one of those things that has been historically the Bears' mantra, though. I mean, if you look at it back when they were really good in the '80s, I mean, Jim McMahon, loved the guy, but he was definitely not a Pro Bowl quarterback. Um, he was just he did enough to let his defense or to let his team win the games. You look at the teams that went to the Super Bowl. I mean, Kyle Orton and Rex Grossman. Between those two, whenever they were in charge of the team, I mean, they did enough to limit the damage. Neither of them was really an outstanding quarterback. It's just been historically, you just have to limit the damage because this defense is going to keep you in every game. So it'll be interesting to see them against high-powered offenses, coming up, like I said, the Saints, and then coming up, you have the division matchup in about 3-4 weeks with the Packers. So it'll be interesting to see. This team did handle business against the Buccaneers before the Buccaneers really got rolling, and after the Buccaneers got rolling, we saw what they are capable of doing in the Sunday night matchup, which was, I mean,
this was a rough game to watch.
It was. I mean, it was a very intriguing matchup going into it. Everybody was really excited to see Rodgers, Brady, and it was not a good one. I just like to say, like, historically the Packers have had a really good offensive line. They've been able to protect Aaron Rodgers, which is why he's been, one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL for a long time because he doesn't get hit. Well, going into this game, they allowed 4 sacks all season. They doubled that and more in this game, giving up 5 sacks. It just was all Tampa after the first quarter. I mean, the first quarter it looked like Green Bay was getting their footing, and then that honestly, I'd like to credit that pick 6 for just kind of swinging the momentum.
Yeah, and I mean this defense really, really dominated this whole game. But I really want to talk about Ronald Jones this week. This Packers defense has been notoriously good at stopping the run, but somehow Jones was able to capitalize on key mistakes or key holes that really we haven't seen this year from this defense. What made this game different from previously. I mean, because they were 4-0 coming into this game, and they had a very good run defense. And then all of a sudden, we just saw Ronald Jones bust out, like had a breakout game against this stellar defense.
Yeah, and I think it was there's two things that equate to this. I think that a lot of people were kind of giving them a lot of credit. But if you look at historically, I mean, this Packers team has just been outscoring their opponents. I mean, they gave up 34 points to the Vikings, 21 to the Lions, 30 to the Saints. I mean, don't get me wrong, the Saints and the is a decent team, but the Vikings, Lions, and then ultimately they beat the Falcons the prior week. So they've been giving up points. That obviously that's the big talk over the offseason was the fact they drafted Jordan Love instead of drafting like a defensive lineman because they've given up the most yards before contact. But honestly, I think a lot of it had to do with the kind of the game plan going into the game. There's a lot of focus on Aaron Jones, not a lot of focus on Ronald Jones. You know, I think the Packers kind of went in not wanting Brady to beat them. Um, and I think, Ronald Jones had a pretty decent day. Obviously, he got the bulk of the carries, and he didn't have any super flashy runs. But I mean, he was efficient in the red zone like they need him to be. With the 2-yard and 1-yard touchdown run. And then on top of that, Brady did just enough to, really ice this game, and especially in that second quarter. I mean, going up 28, being able to put the ball in the end zone with a minute to go, going up 28, 28-10 going into halftime. I think that was kind of the nail in the coffin. And, you knew going into halftime that there was no way that Rodgers was going to lead this team back. Even if they would have scored at any points in the second half, I think it was kind of the nail in the coffin.
Yeah, I mean, this Bucks team is starting to roll. What do we see out of them? I guess I would assume that they take this division by storm.
Yeah. Well, you have the Panthers team who's fluky. They hit or miss. Depends on which Teddy Bridgewater shows up. Then you have the Saints, who also you don't know what's going on with that team with all the off the field issues with Michael Thomas. If that team will ever be back to full strength without any issues? And I mean, do I even need to mention the other team in that division?
Nope. You
Okay.
don't really need to.
All right. Well, yeah. So basically, it's like a two-headed race. It's which Saints team shows up, and then this Buccaneers team. But I think the Bucks team is going to use this momentum, rolling into the future weeks. And I think that again, playing up against a good Raiders team, we're going to see exactly how this team is going to be. Because this Raiders team obviously beat the Chiefs, so it's going to be interesting to see how they do this week, against a really good opponent.
I agree, and I think this Raiders team is actually one to don't sleep on just yet. I think they have been playing very good football over the past couple weeks, and I think they will continue to trend upward and make their case as to why they should be in the playoffs.
Yeah. I mean, sitting there at 3-2, their two losses being to the Patriots team when they were still playing at a high level before COVID unfortunately struck their team down, and the Buffalo team, who is definitely no joke at 4-2, even though they've lost to two good opponents. And I mean, both teams are. I mean, obviously they're not both undefeated, but in a weird way, I mean, the Chiefs and could be undefeated. They're just the Raiders happen to come to play, but I think that this Raiders team will find a way to sneak into the playoffs, maybe as a wild card, especially with the Patriots trending down. The Dolphins going with Tua. I don't think Tua will be able to win close games like Fitzpatrick will. Um, so we're just gonna have to see. We're gonna have to see how this goes. It's just gonna be a fun. It's not gonna be a fun game because you just don't know what's gonna happen. Like any team can be anyone on any day. Um, there's only a few teams who really going into the game have literally zero chance. And I think that's what I like about honestly this season is it's different because the late start like the Bucks team. A lot of people were like, "Oh yeah, they're gonna win every game. There's no way they're gonna lose." Well, this Bears team beat them, and this Bears team, in my opinion, is one of the 5-1 teams who's kind of overrated, in my opinion, a little bit, just because of the strength of schedule they've had and everything. Um, but it's just going to be a fun season to watch. I look forward to we're going to talk about this more on a Sunday show about these upcoming matchups. But let's finish it off. Obviously, the game that I don't really want to talk about, we're just going to pretend like it didn't happen. Chiefs Bills. Um, I mean, this Bills defense is going to have to patch up these defensive holes. In terms of the run game, we have a really stout pass defense, but when teams can just run the ball at will like they did, obviously the conditions didn't help. I mean, everybody I talked to says that, I asked for if in clear conditions. I think this game's different. I think this game's a shootout if it's clear conditions, because I think that the Chiefs stick to the regular offense of passing the ball, and I think that we can cause a few more turnovers. But what do you think about this game? I mean, we're a half an inch. Clyde Alaire's leg was literally like a half, like he literally had just barely touched the top of the turf when he fumbled that ball towards the end of the game. And if that fumble happened, we're talking about a completely different game here. It might have went to overtime. Bills might have won in regulation. Who knows?
I mean, this game was very interesting to watch. I mean, Clyde Edwards since coming into the league, his first game was a great start. Over the past couple games, he has struggled against some very solid defenses, but I did not expect him to have a breakout game like this. I mean, this game was very up in the air for a while. I mean, watching the game in the beginning, Josh Allen did not look on par. I mean, he played in Wyoming, so he was used to the inclement weather. But for both quarterbacks, this was a very hard game to pass the ball in, so they had to rely on their running game. And it just seemed like Devin Singletary was not the answer for this type of game when he had to be basically carry the team.
And I think a lot of it had to do with Zach Moss coming back from an injury this week. He's kind of their in between the trenches bulldog kind of runner. Singletary in sloppy conditions, that's not really his game style. He's more of a pass catcher out of the backfield / like I'd like to compare him like an old Le'Veon Bell kind of, hits the holes, finds the holes. He's not really that guy who runs between the tackles. But I think a lot of this game, like I said, I think in not sloppy conditions, like just judging off of a few of the first Josh Allen throws, this game is a completely different ball game if it's clear conditions. All my friends on Facebook like to say that the Chiefs would have killed them because there's so many weapons, but the thing is they don't have weapons because and I'll take this to the grave with me. If you put anybody but Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce on a different team, if you put Demarcus Robinson and anybody on a different team, they're not going to produce like they are. Patrick Mahomes is making his receivers good, which makes him a good quarterback. Like, I'm no knack on those receivers. I'm just saying, like, half of these guys literally, like, if you think about it, Sammy Watkins, I mean, he obviously didn't play, but he's one of those guys who's, I mean, he's historically been bad, but he comes and rejuvenates his career, and because he has a good quarterback. Byron Pringle, who? Like these guys are not like, okay, don't get me wrong, I'm not knocking on them. They're NFL receivers, so obviously they're good, but it's Patrick Mahomes single-handedly, even though he didn't have the best game, he won this game for him. I mean, it's one of those things where, I want to see these two teams face off in the playoffs for two reasons. One, weather will probably be better. And two, hopefully the Bills defense will be at full strength, minus obviously the few people who opted out of the season, which I think that's the biggest thing that has hurt the Bills this season is they lost two linemen to opting out, defensive linemen, Star Lotulelei, which is, in my opinion, one of their best defensive tackles, and as well as they let Shaq leave. So it's one of those things where it's like they're gonna have to find a defensive presence. The D line's gonna have to step up for the Bills. This Chiefs team, however, I think right now the main focus for them in terms of it is just making sure that they have a consistent line play, because that was what cost them last week. This week they did fairly well. I mean, Patrick Mahomes only got sacked one time, and they had holes for days against Edwards-Helaire. So it's going to be important for them to keep that rolling. If they can keep that rolling in the next few weeks, I mean, they have two pretty easy cakewalk games to really get everything back on track, ready to roll before they start playing a couple of other good stout teams. So this Chiefs team, if I'm looking at the schedule ahead, there's no reason they shouldn't be 13-3.
I
And those
mean,
losses would
that's
be, it depends on what Bucks team shows up, and it depends on if the same Raiders team that played them last time shows up.
right. And this division is probably you got the NFC West. That's a really decent division currently. The AFC East. I don't. This Chiefs team. I think that they will probably end up tying for the division title, and I think that this Raiders team will make a comeback.
Interesting. Okay, I like that. I like that. We can talk about that more on Sunday with the upcoming games
I
and
do
stuff
have
like that.
one thing to say, which we can touch on Sunday, but I just want to let you know. I don't know if you saw yet.
No, absolutely. Let it
Seattle
rip.
Seahawks are looking into Antonio Brown after Week 8.
Yeah, I know that. I know that it'll be interesting. If anybody could take in that, it would be Russell Wilson. I think that he's got the leadership qualities to maybe make them maybe make him into a better person on and off the field. So we'll just have to see how that works. It'll be interesting to see exactly what happens. Also, I'd like to state one thing about this. I'm going to go back to the Bills Chiefs game. Kind of a crazy thing that happened after the game is almost I guess it would be almost like 2 weeks after giving him extension, the Bills have cut their offensive lineman Quentin Span. Kind of interesting because they literally had just signed him to a 3-year contract this year. So one of those
Isn't he a
things
Pro
where
Bowl
you
guard?
don't. Yeah, he was from the Titans. He was a undrafted free agent with the Giants, or not the Giants, the Titans, and yeah, and then he came over to the Bills. But yeah, he signed an extension. He played all games for us last year, and then he literally didn't give up a sack last year, I think. And then it came down to it. He just wasn't performing anymore. So it just wasn't working out. We got rid of him. I don't know. It's one of those things. We'll have to see how that works out for the Bills. But and also in that game, they sat two of their defensive linemen starters for lack of production. So it'll be interesting to see if they can bounce back, especially against the Jets this week.
All right. Well, it's enough about baseball.
I mean
Football.
football. Let's go to baseball.
Wow. Well, you see, I'm twisting my words already.
It's early. It's okay.
So, what are your first impressions after this game one?
So kind of how I thought this game was going to go. In terms of the Dodgers were going to come out firing. I mean, it wasn't necessarily the start that I thought that Clayton Kershaw was going to have in the World Series. Only giving up that one run, kind of surprising. I know a lot of people, were anticipating him to choke again. But he's been better in his first start in a series than he is in his future starts. So it'll be intriguing to watch his, as he rolls into that week, the week 4 or the game 4 or the game 5, whichever he ends up getting slated for. So it'll be interesting to see how that, kind of carries into that. I think the biggest takeaway though is Tyler Glasnow kind of, having probably his worst start of the postseason. I think this team bounces back. I think it sets up an intriguing game too. I like Blake Snell a lot. I think that he's gonna take care of business against Gonsolin, but this Dodgers offense is just very potent. So you're gonna have to prevent runs every chance you get. You got to leave runners on base. You can't really put people on against this Dodgers team because 1 through 9 can really hurt you.
Yeah, and they're also very good at taking fouling off dirty pitches to get a good pitch for them. And the person I really want to highlight that is Cody Bellinger. And as much as I do not like talking about the Dodgers, I really would like to people to watch his at bats. The way he is able to foul off pitches he doesn't like, to wait for a good pitch in his zone to where he can take the ball anywhere he wants it to. That is an excellent tradecraft to have as a baseball player, is to take a 1-2 count, foul off two pitches, make it a 3-2 count to where they give you a fastball and you're able to put that in play. That is a very essential part of being a very good baseball player, and he does that extremely well. I do want to say a bright point to the Tampa Bay is that Kiermaier is off to a good start in this series. I think he is going to be one of their main focal points of this series that needs to stay hot in order to make this an actual series.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, he went. I think he went 2 for 3, and then he did get the home run for Tampa. And I think that the important thing to mention is that Cody Bellinger, with all the stuff, people were kind of criticizing him and everything, for not being able to come up in the clutch last season. I think that it kind of just shows, his development as well. I mean, he had a shoulder injury, I think it was, in the NLCS. And I think that, he's kind of bounced back, came back and produced in 2 really important games. So I think with that being said, I think this is going to be a good series. I think this first game, I think it's just, it showed experience wins early in the series. I think it's going to take a little bit for them to get going, but I think Blake Snell will find a way. Um, I think he'll find a way to bounce back. I got the Rays tonight, 5-2.
Okay. And I have the race tonight as well. I think this is going to be a game that swings momentum slightly just for at least 2 or 3 games. I'm taking the Rays in 7. I do think this is going to go the whole 7 games.
And I think that the interesting thing, about how we were talking before the show about the setup of the playoffs, and I think that this game here is a chance to knock off any bit of momentum that the Dodgers have going in. If the Rays can steal this game, I think really neither team will have. I think it'll almost set up a whole new series. Because it almost is a whole new series. That those 3 games that are all played back to back to back. I think that's literally like another whole 3-game series. It's like a mini series within the series. So it's just going to be interesting to see if they can stop the Dodgers' momentum, stop all the offense going. And I think that falls on the left arm of Blake Snell.
And I think the most crucial part of this series is going to be the turnaround for starting pitchers. If Tyler Glasnow can start on short rest and pitch better than he pitched in Game 1, I think that'll make a huge contribution as to where Kershaw comes back. And we've all seen Kershaw, his second start of a series has always been exponentially worse than his first start. So I think if there was a game to lose, and I'm not saying that you should lose any game in a series, if there was a game to lose, this probably could have been the game that the Tampa Bay could have lost and still be okay.
Yeah, and I'd just like to state teams that LeBron cheers for historically, when they go down early, circa the last time that he won a championship, I would just like to say went down 3-1. Cubs came back and won that series. So they're never going to be out of it. It's always going to be an interesting series, especially with LeBron cheering for the Dodgers now that he's an LA guy.
Blasphemy.
Yeah. All right. So let's transition. We haven't really talked about it a whole lot because there hasn't been a whole lot to talk about since the finals got over with. But we do have a few big headlines that we're just going to briefly touch. A lot of scenery changes for a lot of big names in the NBA. First, I'd like to start off with the process. The process going with kind of an interesting pick, in my an interesting decision in bringing in Doc Rivers. What is your opinion on that?
I think it's a wise decision at this point in um their franchise history because Doc Rivers has been known to turn around franchises. The issue I'm going to run into is he able to get to these players' level and help them elevate their game? Um, because a head coach has to, I don't want to say inspire, that's a cheesy word, but has to reach these players to help them want to play better ball and help them get to an elite type level of play. And if he can't do that to this team, then I think this franchise is probably doomed for the next 5 years.
Yeah, I think there's still still have enough talent on that team to be in almost win now mode. And so it's going to be intriguing to see if he can flip that team immediately and get them back to where they are definitely capable of going. Um, another team that obviously the replacement to Doc Rivers not coming back is this Tyronn Lue going to the Clippers. It, I'm really intrigued by this signing because it's one of those things where it's like Tyronn Lue is a decent enough coach, but he had the personnel, aka LeBron, that really elevated him to a better. I think a better. He seemed like he was a better coach than what I would be. Like then I think people literally give him the credit for.
Well, LeBron's a coach in himself as he plays the ball. So, but you also saw when LeBron was in Cleveland that Tyron Lue kind of took a backseat approach, and he cannot do that with this Clippers team. He has to because he doesn't have that LeBron type person to help coach. And I think this will be a testament to his coaching ability. If he can make this team, you know, a deep end playoff contender, as because Doc Rivers did. Let's be honest here, that team was good. They just couldn't finish, and that's what got them in trouble in the playoffs. But I think it's going to take a. I don't think that this team goes back to the playoffs this year.
I mean, I think with all the talent that they still have, you're gonna have. They just have to click. And the thing about that is you have three, arguably three of the best perimeter defenders in the league on the same team, and Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, and Patrick Beverly, and they just got exposed by Jamal Murray and Luka. I mean, they have to figure it out. I think that Tyronn Lue is going to have to just not necessarily break this team down, but I think they're going to need to get rid of a few of the aging pieces. I don't think Lou Williams comes back. Or I think he's going to find a job elsewhere. Montrezl Harrell, the he was honestly competing for a sixth man of the year, and it kind of just fell off this year. Um, I mean, he fell off when it mattered in the postseason. So I don't think he'll be coming back, especially with him being an unrestricted free agent. So it's just gonna be one of those things. They're gonna have to compete with a lot of teams now. I mean, everybody's getting better. The Warriors are going to get healthy. I think everybody's kind of in win now mode, especially like these teams who have kind of older cores and, they got those big contracts that are going to come up and they're going to want to see production.
And we talked about where Giannis is going to end up, and I think that's going to play a part into which teams will reach that next level of contendership. But I do want to talk about the SVP signing that we saw earlier today. He is now going to be the head coach of the Pelicans in Zion. How do you think that's a good fit?
So obviously, he has been kind of, I guess, I don't know. It's really hard to say because his last stint as a coach was he it was 2018, so he's been out of it for a little bit. Um and he only led the Pistons to one playoff team. Obviously that was a pretty rough Pistons team. Um I just don't see the only thing that I see is it's very similar kind of is that when he did his initial stint or his initial stint that really got him to be a name in the business, I think was when he was with the Magic and they did draft Dwight Howard. And I think that Dwight Howard has a lot of similar qualities to Zion about being a dominant uh, in the post and everything. And I think that he kind of knew how to build a team around him. And I think that with that prior knowledge where he built a team around Dwight, made the playoffs and almost won ultimately lost in the finals. But I think that if you give him time to build a team around Zion, I think that he's a smart enough man that he will definitely find a way to make that team into a winner.
And I do think it's a good fit for him because that Magic team was a super young team as well when he did his first stint as a head coach for the Magic. Later on, that Detroit team really wasn't that great. I mean, they had an aging Chauncey Billups at the time before he left. They had lost all their core players in Tayshaun Prince and that group. It was just a brutal time. It was a rebuilding phase for Detroit at the time. So I'm very excited to see what he brings to the table for Zion to grow as a player and hopefully be more dominant this upcoming season.
It's gonna be interesting just to see how that uh, ultimately pans out there. And I wanted to talk one thing. Um, what do you think is going to happen with this Warriors team? Because the Warriors are still a good team. They're still a solid roster. I mean, they literally have. I mean, the thing is that their core is aging. So a lot of people are trying to tell them that they should trade the number 2 overall pick, get another star, or get another quality bench player that could help them win now because their core is aging. But I think at the end of the day, you got to kind of look down the road here, and Steph and Clay and Draymond are all in their 30s. Like you can look at it two ways: win now mode with the guys you have, or kind of start planning to the future. Like, do you think your core is good enough to win now? Then you should draft somebody who can, kind of learn underneath, like Steph and Clay, and ultimately, hopefully, take over your team eventually.
I do not think this team is in win now mode. I mean, just looking at the roster, this is a very solid young team. I mean, D'Angelo Russell, Andrew Wiggins, Alec Burks, Jordan Poole are all young players that I think will trend upward in the near future. Now, that being said, here's a crazy idea. What if you traded maybe Clay Thompson off for better picks in an upcoming draft or for younger talent to start rebuilding? I mean, you got to see where you get your value from. If you're not in a win mode now, you're in a rebuilding phase. And I think that's where this Warriors team is heading is to rebuilding.
Yeah, and I think that they like this past year was. I think the past year was kind of a bridge year. You kind of saw where the future of the Warriors was going to be, with them basically playing all of their draft picks and everything like that, because of that. So, I mean, if you look ahead to the draft, I mean, if they keep the pick, um, I think I think there's a good chance that they could take possibly, an Anthony Edwards, a shooting guard that could take the place of one of the two. Because I know that I'm sure one of them is going to want to get paid here in the next few years. Get that maybe that last contract before they ultimately, call it quits. Um, it's one of those things where there's a lot of like the top 5 in this draft is all like there's not necessarily a big like consensus number 1, if that makes sense. Like you have
Right, right.
LaMelo,
It's a
you
number
got,
one by committee.
James Wiseman ultimately, if he wouldn't have had to sit out, probably could have been the number 1 overall pick. A lot of people had him projected as number 1, but with him having to sit out this past year, it was because of the whole contract dispute with Penny and everything, with Penny Hardaway. So it'll be interesting to see. I just don't know, with there not being a consensus top 5, where everybody should fall. Maybe they'd have a better chance. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if you have a different opinion than I do, but sitting there with the number 2 overall pick, I think if you want to win now, you trade it, you give it to a team. I mean, maybe you deal for, you really need to deal for like maybe a dominant center or another small forward that can come in and give you minutes. So I don't know. I mean, I'm just looking at the teams that they could possibly make a deal with.
And I mean, right now there's not many teams that they could deal with. Everyone's. It seems like half the league is in rebuilding phase. To be
Yeah,
100% honest.
a lot of people are speculating, and this isn't going to happen, and maybe they'll prove me wrong, but a lot of them are saying they're going to package the number 2 overall pick and Draymond, and they're going to go get Giannis.
I don't see Giannis going to Golden State.
Yeah. And also, with that being said, there's also talks that there's going to be a package deal of 4 players and a pick being sent to OKC for Chris Paul in order to try to keep Giannis there as a lifer for
Milwaukee.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see. I don't know. It's still early in it, and we'll be able to talk about this for a while to come.
And we got a lot of time left.
We got a lot. Yeah, just for speculation. But with that being said, do you want to go ahead and
question of the day?
Wrap it up with the old question? Yeah. So we're gonna go ahead and use this question. It was a very intriguing question. Kind of left us a lot of room to elaborate on. If I guess that'd be the way I would put it. But so with the way the current season has gone, who do you think that the biggest bust, or like not necessarily bust, but just acquisition was? Like who do you think, kind of was maybe the loser in a trade, or signed a big name free agent that ultimately did not pan out? What do you think, kind of going based off that?
I have 2 avenues I want to explore this with. The first one is pretty obvious, would be the David Johnson and DeAndre Hopkins trade, where Houston got the very, very bad end of a David Johnson that was off injury, that hasn't really lived up to the hype. Um, and through this current season has not even scratched the surface of what he did back in Arizona when he had that very breakout season. I think that is probably the number one dud of an acquisition of the season. The second avenue I'd like to expend, we haven't really seen yet, is this Le'Veon Bell to Kansas City. Because I don't know if Le'Veon Bell would be a good fit in this offense. This offense has started clicking a lot better over the past couple weeks. And to throw Le'Veon Bell in there is not only going to deter Clyde Edwards-Helaire from reaching his potential, but Le'Veon Bell is also getting older to where he isn't putting up the numbers that we expect him to be putting up season after season. So those are my 2 explanations for our question of the day.
Okay. So I'll carry off what you said. I think that That David Johnson one is definitely a good one. I think that you're wrong about Kansas City and Le'Veon Bell. And I think the reason why is that Le'Veon Bell went to the Jets to get paid and was on a terrible team and was basically told to just carry their offense. And I think that is not the way that Le'Veon Bell plays. Because if you have big like when he was successful with the Steelers, he had a quarterback in Big Ben. He had a number one and arguably number two receiver in Antonio Brown and Juju. And I think that with that being said, when he is the focal point of an offense, he's not going to be good. So now you're going to an offense that has Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce. You have Clyde, who can be your first and second down back, and you can put him in passing situations. I mean, I think he's going to kind of do. I don't think he's going to be a necessarily be an every down back, and I think that's what's ultimately going to prolong his career and make him kind of relevant, because I think that if he doesn't get a bunch of touches on a really bad team, he's going to be on a good team. I think that he completely flips the switch. So I'm definitely not going to say that he's necessarily a bad acquisition. I mean, the rich get richer is what everybody's saying, but I'd like to say an acquisition that I think, I mean, it was good in theory, but I think that ultimately he's been hurt with the loss of Christian McCaffrey, but I do not think, and I might be the only one that thinks this, but I don't think that Teddy Bridgewater is the answer for Carolina. I like him. I think he can win some games. But sitting there at 3-3, losing to a Bears team that's offense is not necessarily the best. I understand it's a good defense. I mean, they've been putting up 15 plus points a game, but I just don't think that, Teddy Bridgewater, I mean, he did really well on the Saints team that was really good with Drew Brees. And then when Drew Brees goes down and he takes over, I mean, obviously he earned this spot, but I don't think that he is going to lead them to the playoffs, and I don't think he's the answer in Carolina.
Yes, I do agree with that. I do believe that Mr. Bridgewater is not the quarterback option for Carolina. And we have seen it actually. It has become very apparent ever since they lost their number one running back. However, I do think with the arrival of Mike Davis, who has been playing extremely well while Mr. McCaffrey has been out, and you have very good receivers in DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson, he has to play better. He's got to complete more passes. He's got to put up more yards. His efficiency is so bad currently that it's hurting what could be a good team, and that's why I agree.
Yeah, and I think that obviously it hurts them. The fact, I mean, they've had 4 offensive linemen that have been added to the COVID list this year. So that doesn't help him necessarily. Obviously, they're not necessarily starters. But and Mike Davis being, kind of gimped up with the ankle injury, Curtis Samuel with bothered by the knee injury. I think that injuries has definitely plagued this team, and maybe Teddy Bridgewater will prove me wrong the rest of the season. But right now it's looking like, I don't know. I mean, he's beat 3 teams, but the Cardinals are, like I said, the iffy team that is not as good as what their record shows. Falcons, they barely beat them, and they've been choking every game basically this year. And then the Chargers, they beat with a rookie quarterback. So it's going to be one of those things where I hope he proves me wrong. The last time I said that somebody was a bum, they went off for 400 yards next week. So we'll just see. We'll just see how they do up against the Saints this weekend.
Yeah, well, that's just going to have to be, the dependent factor on how these teams play is when we see them against good teams. I mean, you can beat a Falcons team that is 1-5, but can you beat, a team that has actually been playing well and carrying themselves? So we'll see. We'll be seeing that soon.
Yep, and I think with that being said, we're gonna wrap it up. If you guys have anything else that you would like to see, covered here on, covered on the show, please go ahead and drop it down in the comments, whether it be, international sports like soccer and other like rugby, or whatever you want to see. We're gonna try our best to deliver all the sports that you guys want to see. So just comment below what you want to see. Um, and with that being said, I think we're just gonna wrap it up here. Unless you got anything else.
Nah, I mean we'll see everybody on Friday then.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll see you on Friday for the college preview, as well as talking about the baseball games that will ultimately going on. But with that being said, we will catch you guys Friday, and I hope you guys have a wonderful Wednesday. Peace.
Everybody take it easy.